to the Brazil-US Partnership 2021 and Beyond event hosted by our Brazilian American Chamber of Commerce of Florida. I'd like to welcome the participants and our honored guests in this event, Ambassador Nestor, Forster, Ambassador of Brazil to the United States of America. Welcome, Ambassador Nestor. Ambassador João Mendes, Consul General here at the Brazilian Consulate in Miami. Welcome, João Mendes, Ambassador João Mendes. And Cássio Segura, our moderator. He is the chair of the one of the most important committees at our chamber, which is the Special Relations, and he'll be here today to moderate this event. I'd like to extend our thanks to the Brazilian Embassy in Washington, the Brazilian Consulate General in Miami, the Conselho de Cidadãos from the consulate, Achei USA newspaper, Raia 3, and our strategic partners, Enterprise Florida, the Beacon Council, the Miami-Dade International Trade Consortium, and the Greater Miami Chamber of Commerce of Florida. We welcome our members. For those of you participating for the first time, we encourage you to join the BACCF. We are the largest binational chamber in South Florida. Feel free to contact our offices to schedule a meeting. Throughout the presentation, you're welcome to send your questions. Ambassador Forster will do his best to answer as many as possible at the end. The Q&A session will be moderated by Mr. Cássio Segura, BACCF, former president and chairman of the BACCF Strategic Partnerships Committee. And at this time, it is with our immense pleasure to welcome Ambassador João Mendes Pereira.
Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, let me express my appreciation for the valuable help provided by Enterprise Florida, the Greater Miami Chamber of Commerce, the Miami-Dade International Consortium, among other institutions and partners who were key for the materialization of this event, promoted by the Brazilian American Chamber of Commerce of Florida, BACCF. I have the honor to welcome my dear friend, Ambassador Nestor Forster, to this important webinar promoted by the Brazilian American Chamber of Commerce of Florida. For our community here in Florida, this is a unique opportunity to listen to his presentation, which I am certain will be very enriching to all the participants gathered by the BACCF today. Ambassador Forster and I have known each other for more than 3 decades. During this time, I have witnessed the development of his successful career, always focused on promoting the Brazilian interest domestically and abroad. It is indeed a privilege for the Brazilians to have Nestor Forster as our ambassador in Washington. He is the true example of the very best our diplomacy has to offer. Nestor, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador João Mendes, for that very kind and generous introduction. Let me start by thanking the Brazilian American Chamber of Commerce of Florida and its president, Alexandre Piquet, and all the other organizations who helped us organize this conversation here today. I want to especially thank the Consulate General in Miami, under the leadership of Ambassador João Mendes, for helping support this event today. And I also want to highlight the outstanding job that Ambassador João Mendes has been doing in so many areas, including in supporting the business community in Florida and beyond. Let me tell you, I see this opportunity for us here today to take our message beyond the Beltway, beyond our day-to-day routine here in Washington, D.C. And it's a special pleasure to be with all the members of the Chamber and all of you who join us here today from Florida, a state that has a very special place in all the hearts of Brazilians here in the United States, a state with which we have this tremendous relationship in terms of trade, in terms of investment, with the presence of some great Brazilian companies there. We have a very intense relationship in the whole tourism area, unfortunately hindered by the pandemic over this past year, but we should soon resume our traditional presence there in Miami and Orlando and all around Florida. And of course, this is a witness to the presence of a very vibrant Brazilian community there in the great state of Florida. So let me just begin from the beginning. I like to start these conversations just framing a little bit our relationship in historic terms, and then I'll just move fast forward to bring to you some of the more current developments with the new administration here in Washington. I think that's one of the focus of interest for our conversation here today, and highlighting just some of the key elements in our very broad bilateral agenda. So from the beginning, as you know, Brazil and the US enjoy what is, from the Brazilian point of view, the longest standing relationship Brazil has with any country in the world. It's almost 200 years old, this formal diplomatic relations between our countries, which have always been friendly, sometimes more intense, sometimes a bit less, but always very friendly. And that's based on the values we share. And when I say we, I'm not speaking only on behalf of the Brazilian government, but I think I speak for the Brazilian society. We have a very strong commitment to democracy, to democratic values, to the rule of law, to human rights, economic freedom. This is in the very DNA of Brazilian society, and that's something that forms the foundation for the great relationship we have with the United States. Now, this is something that has been highlighted by the new administration here, by the Biden administration in different occasions. And we have started a very positive engagement from the get-go with the Biden administration. President Bolsonaro, on the day of the inauguration of President Joe Biden, he sent a letter, a kind of lengthy letter, laying out what I just spoke about the shared values, the shared history of our two countries, and also mentioning specific points in our agenda for cooperation, a very broad agenda, as I referred to at the outset, and I'll comment what are the main elements of this agenda as we proceed. That letter received a very warm welcome from President Biden. He replied just last week. He replied to President Bolsonaro in very good terms and reaffirming the commitment of his administration to working with Brazil in a very broad agenda with some priorities which are shared by both our countries. We also had very good positive interactions between our Foreign Minister Nestor, Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Just end of last week, our Minister of the Economy, Guedes, had a very good conversation with Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen. There are others already scheduled, agriculture and so on, the whole area of trade. So this is an ongoing thing as new senior officials take their positions in the administration. One of the main areas that has been highlighted by the new administration as its top priority has been the whole issues related to environmental protection, climate change, and so on. And Brazil has been paying attention, and that's why we sought a very early engagement with the new administration. We worked here to have an early conversation with former Secretary, Special Presidential Envoy for Climate Change, John Kerry. That was a very, very positive conversation that we had. That was followed by a ministerial level conversation with him between our Foreign Minister and Minister of the Environment. And this was like over 3 weeks ago now. And this has set in motion technical conversations, technical meetings, which are ongoing as we speak, seeking to explore what we can do, what Brazil and the United States can do together in the whole realm of sustainable development, environmental protection, and so on, both at the bilateral level, where we have the pressing issues of fighting deforestation in the Amazon, and at the same time bringing economic opportunity for the 25 million Brazilians who live there, in order to overcome what we call the Amazon paradox, the Amazonian paradox, which is the Amazon, the richest, the wealthiest region in Brazil in terms of natural resources, and also the one that has the lowest human development indexes in our country. So we need to address that. And we think the answer for that is sustainable development, bringing economic opportunity and at the same time protecting the environment. So that's something that Brazil and the US have a lot to do. I can expand a little bit more in terms of what we're seeing in that specific agenda. But also, beyond the bilateral cooperation, we also have the upcoming COP meeting in November in Glasgow, which will provide opportunity for continued for Brazil and the US to continue to work together to provide solutions to the great challenges we have in the whole area of the environment. Considering, the dire situation in Brazil with the pandemic right now, it's also something that I would like to mention. What we've been doing together, and there's a lot that's been going on since last year in terms of bilateral cooperation. We appreciate all the help that was provided by many American companies. We also received donations of equipment and medicines from the American government. There are specific projects from the US AID to provide support for health in the Amazon region. We also, perhaps I should highlight one of the most important aspects of this cooperation is an ongoing dialogue we have at the White House. It's a small group of countries which have been meeting regularly for the past year since the outbreak of the pandemic about a year ago. And it has been going on in the Biden administration. Just 2 weeks ago, we had a meeting with the Minister of Science and Technology participating, discussing ways to find therapies, strategies for vaccine deployment and so on. And we even had participation of the Brazilian scientists who have isolated the variant there, the P1 variant in Brazil. The effort in Brazil continues. There's lots of outcry about it in the press. It's a very serious situation. I don't want to diminish that in any sense. But all levels of government are doing what we can to fight the pandemic. Just to update you on the vaccine issue, Brazil has acquired over 230 million doses, which should be available by the end of June. We have already distributed 20 million vaccines, and 12.3 vaccines as of yesterday have already been administered, which places Brazil in the 5th position as in the world ranking for vaccination. We also have succeeded in vaccinating the most vulnerable in our populations. We are working with the elderly, the healthcare workers, and also the indigenous peoples living in indigenous lands in the Amazon. Over 400,000 have already been vaccinated. So that's a good record in an overall very challenging situation which we're facing right now. But let me look beyond that and address some of the more immediate concerns for you all members of the chamber and all those who join us today, speaking a little bit about the trade and investment agenda. So what we hear from the private sector, both here in the United States and in Brazil, from chambers of commerce around the country, from the US Brazil Chamber of Commerce, from MCHAM in São Paulo, from Fiesp, from the National Confederation of Industry, CNI, and so many other entities in Brazil, is that there is a continued interest in broadening and deepening the trade relations with the United States. As you are aware, last October, we signed 3 landmark agreements on trade facilitation, good regulatory practices, anti-corruption measures, etc. That's been finalized. It's now being sent to Congress to be approved on the Brazilian side. On the American side, it's not required to go to Congress. So it will be ready for implementation very soon. We want to have an expedite process in Congress so that perhaps by the mid this year, these agreements could be in place. And we see them as paving the way. They deal with the framework, the regulatory framework for a broader agreement. We see them as perhaps stepping stones towards a broader and then more ambitious agreement. So that remains on our agenda. We know that the Trade Promotion Authority, TPA, here is set to expire at the end of this first semester. Perhaps the impetus to renew it is not immediately there, but I think we should not let go of this objective of having the deeper trade agreement with the United States. I frankly think that, being the two largest democracies, the two largest economies in the Western Hemisphere, this is actually something long overdue. We are below potential in our trade relationship, and we should work hard to address that. There are some, specific questions in the trade agenda that I just want to mention in passing. Just a couple of irritants that remain with the application of measures under Section 232, which hinder our exports of steel and aluminum to the U.S. market. And that's we make the point that not only harms the Brazilian exporters, but also the American consumers, the American importers, as most of our steel exported to the American market is semi-finished. So, it's being used by the American industry here, creating jobs here. It's a very well integrated operation. So we would like to see those barriers removed very soon in the Biden administration. We also engage in an effort both at the Hill here in Congress and with our friends in the trade area of the government to renew the GSP, the Generalized System of Preferences, which we again see as a win-win for both Brazil and the US. Brazil has been among the three or four largest beneficiaries of the program. And, at the end of the day, it comes also, our exports under the GSP benefit American consumers and the American industry. Aside from that, let me just quickly mention the new developments in Brazil here in terms of economic reform. Last week we had the fiscal bill approved, opening the way for more action in this front. We have the tax reform in Congress, and we are very hopeful that with the new leadership, which was just elected this past February for both houses, both the Senate and the Chamber, that we'll be able to move the reform agenda as fast as we would like. Of course, this has suffered a little impact over the past year because of the pandemic. We lost a bit of the speed with which we were proceeding. We want to make up for some of the lost time and engage very decisively in reform. Another demonstration of that was that the bill that was approved just the wee hours of this morning, a new bill deregulating the market for natural gas in Brazil, which will ultimately increase competition, lower prices, and open new opportunities for investment in this very, very important sector, and also help us increase, protection of our environment. There are also many opportunities in Brazil, as you know, with the partnerships program for investments, the so-called PPI. There are over $80 billion available this year in many public auctions, related to infrastructure, especially in ports and airports. Many of these auctions are coming up just this coming next month in April. To wrap up here, so I don't take too much time with my prepared remarks, and we can open up for questions. Just like to mention that we have a broad agenda which encompasses, aside from what I spoke here, trade, investment, health, environment. We also have important new developments in the area of science and technology. For instance, we have a very ambitious bilateral plan for the next 4 years for cooperating in this crucial area for our societies, for innovation, for creating opportunities in Brazil. You are aware of what we signed and approved last year, the Technological Safeguards Agreement, which will enable American companies to use the base in Alcântara in northeastern Brazil to launch satellites. It's supposed to be the best place in the world for satellite launching, just 2 degrees south of the equator, and enabling the launching of satellites in either direction, north, south, or east and west. We also have new developments in the area of space exploration. Brazil was the first Latin American country and one of a very small group of countries which have formalized interest in joining the Artemis project, which, as you know, it's the most ambitious program for space exploration since the Apollo program over 50 years ago. And this is supposed to take a woman to the moon and a man mission to Mars. We also had a very, very interesting agreement signed between the Smithsonian Institution here in Washington, largest museum institutions in the world, but also great research institutions in several areas, including the environment, and our Ministry of Science and Technology. And we are working together to implement that with a view to using some of the materials available from the Smithsonian that will be used to teach science in Brazilian public schools. So this is a project which has a tremendous educational and social outreach for Brazil, and we are very proud that we were able to put it in force. Aside from that, we have a traditional historic cooperation between our military, our defense industries. As you know, just recently, over a year ago, Brazil was designated as a major non-NATO ally. We also last year signed an agreement called the RDT&E, Research, Development, Testing, and Evaluation Agreement for the joint development of defense products. The US only has this kind of agreement with 14 other countries around the world. This is now being examined by the Foreign Affairs Committee in the Brazilian Congress. We expect action soon. One last thing on this very vibrant agenda of defense cooperation. Just now in February, we wrapped up one of the largest exercises ever conducted jointly by our forces. We had this operation culminating, which brought a whole company of parachutists from Brazil to the US, to Louisiana. It was a very successful operation using equipment manufactured by Embraer. The KC-390 aircraft was successfully employed during the operation. And this is something that the US has done with just a handful of other countries. And Brazil is very proud to be a part of that small group of countries that has this close relationship with the US in such an important area. I mean, I could go on here talking about, the vibrancy of our agenda here, our informal agenda, let's put it that way, that gathers, our societies in terms of what we do together in education, in tourism, and you in Florida know this firsthand, in the whole area of the creative industries and so on and so forth. I'll stop here and I'll open for whatever questions you might have, addressing our bilateral relationship. I'll try to answer to the best of my ability. And once again, I want to thank you for your attention and for the opportunity to participate in this conversation with you here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Nestor Forster, for your lightning remarks. And Brazil and United States are two of the largest and most important economies in the world. So we always have to talk and being together. Also, I'd like to thank our General Consul of Brazil in Florida, Ambassador João Mendes, and our Chamber President, Mr. Alexandre Piquet, for the invitation to be the moderator here today. We have many questions, many good questions. So I would like to say that sometimes I will put some questions together if they are similar in order to cover as more subjects we can. And also, if any question that you sent is not answered, we are sending that questions to the Brazilian embassy in Washington, and they will answer later to you. Okay. So, Ambassador Nestor, the first question is, can you provide, please, an overview on how the Brazilian consulates in the United States are dealing with the restrictions brought on by the pandemic, and how are they servicing the Brazilian citizens? Is there any time frame for the Brazilian consulates fully reopen?
Thank you for that question. Look, the embassy follows very closely what our 10 consulates here in the United States do. And, I would like to start by commending the tremendous work that they've done, since the beginning of the pandemic. There was, at the first moment about a year ago, there was a whole question of helping repatriate Brazilians who were, kind of stranded because of the whole pandemic situation and restrictions in flights and so on. And the consulates played a vital role in an operation that, it was here in the US, but also around the world, dealing with unprecedented numbers I think it was about 40,000 Brazilians at the end who were brought back to Brazil, able to go back to Brazil due to the efforts, thankfully, to the efforts of our consular officers, both here in the United States and around the world. So that's one thing. The second thing about the day-to-day activities, to the best of my knowledge, most of our consulates have never shut down. What we do is we have to obey local restrictions, what's determined by local authorities in terms of observing, limitation in the number of people that we can serve every day. And because of that, there's been let's say, a slowdown in services and some restrictions to what consulates are able to do. This affects us all, including the embassy here. We have a reduced personnel rotating to avoid contagion, to avoid exposing our colleagues to the disease. And this is done, following what is determined by local authorities. So we don't have the leeway to say we want to, open to everyone and to the full extent that we were working before the pandemic. That's beyond our capacity at this point. What we've been trying to do is to serve the community to the best of our abilities. And I think our Consulate General in Miami is a good example of that, and others around the country, trying to do as much as possible via, virtually, let's say, and opening in presence for those services which require the presence of those who need our services. And our expectation is the situation here in the US is improving very fast. We hope that soon those restrictions will be lifted and our consulate network here in the United States will be up to full speed again.
Thank you, Ambassador Nestor Forster. We have some questions here about bilateral agreements. So one of them, if there is any conversation or there are any conversations about automotive industry investments, direct investments in Brazil, between US and Brazil. And another one that I think many people would like to know if there is any conversation also to have a tax treat to avoid double taxation between Brazilians and Americans. So one is about the automotive industry, and the other one is about double taxation, an agreement to avoid double taxation between Brazil and US.
Thank you very much, Cassio. Thank you for that question. Look, the automotive industry is a key industry, both for Brazil and the US. There's a tremendous degree of integration between what's done between companies in both countries. There was an announcement late last year, if I'm not mistaken, by Ford about shutting a plant in northeastern Brazil, and there was some concern associated with that. And what we heard from Ford itself was that was not a Brazil-specific decision. It was something that had to do with the global strategy of the company to reduce the production of a certain line of cars. And that led to the closing of that factory. But we very much welcome continued investment in this very, very key sector of our economy. And this administration in Brazil is very much determined to reducing the cost of doing business in Brazil, streamlining regulations in order to bring the whole process of investment in Brazil more rational, more forthcoming for those who are interested in bringing their resources to our country. And American companies, as you know, are at the very top of that. The US has remained historically the #1 foreign investor in Brazil. Recent data just released by the central bank shows that the stock of FDI, of American FDI in Brazil, is $145 billion for the latest year available. That's just to give in terms of reference, that's about 5 times what Chinese investment is in Brazil. So it shows how important it is, how consolidated and how integrated it is very broadly, including in the automotive sector. Now, the question of double taxation, that has been something that's been on our agenda for a very long time. Let me tell you, 25 years ago, I began dealing with this issue here when I was posted to the embassy for the first time. And it's still on our plate. We haven't been able to come together and address some of the discrepancies, the differences we have in our tax codes and in our tax framework. We see an opportunity now with tax reform in Brazil. As this moves forward, we should try to build in, some sort of approach that will deal with the double taxation issues, especially thinking about companies and which invest in one country or the other. As you are well aware, we have also a tremendous growth of the Brazilian investment in the United States, and Florida is a witness to that. And what we would like is to avoid, to make more efficient, whatever operations are done between those companies, to allow for more integration and less, not wasting resources. In terms of the individuals fighting for their tax returns, there are already some mechanisms to address that, which are not ideal. Perhaps there's room also to address those sorts of shortcomings we have, but I think it's a less pressing situation than the one we have right now with the business double taxation.
Thank you. Very clarify information about the U.S. investment in Brazil. In fact, Brazil and U.S. they have very close ties, and they've been doing business since the independence. So it's a long time partnership. Ambassador Nestor, sometimes the Brazilian president share opinions and comments that not necessarily align with the new U.S. government policies. Do you think this can impact the relationship between the two countries? Can Brazil be left behind, like in current and future trade agreements or negotiations? How can you expect to manage these differences so they not impact the bilateral relationship?
Thank you. Look, I'm not in a position to comment on what the president says. He says what he wants to say. He is the leader of our country. He was elected by 57 million Brazilians. He's entitled to his opinion. What I can tell you is that the engagement we see from the Biden administration is a very positive and constructive one, and that has been demonstrated very clearly in all the manifestations that come from the White House itself, reaffirming the strategic character of our relationship as the two largest democracies, the two largest economies in the Western Hemisphere, the values that we share, the long history that we share, and the openness and disposition of the Biden administration to work very closely with Brazil to continue to promote this agenda of which I've been talking here about, which is so broad, so deep in so many areas. And of course, the new administration has its priorities. We are listening and we are ready to work together. First and foremost, with the environmental agenda, and we have already something to show for it, as we have an ongoing discussion, as referred to at the outset, on this very, very important issue.
Okay, thank you. Ambassador, the recovery of China exports after the COVID can be a threat to Brazil exports opportunities to the US? China, I think, is growing their exports a lot here to the US. It can take a piece of the Brazilian share in this market?
Look, I don't see a direct relationship, a direct competition head-to-head on specific markets. Much can be said also about the disputes, the trade disputes between the U.S. and China, and those have opened some opportunities for Brazil in exporting even more to China, especially in agricultural exports and raw materials and so on. We are not very keen on that sort of approach. We prefer to seek, an increase in market share towards the opening up, the removal of trade barriers, and the increase in the efficiency of our production. One thing that's been said, perhaps it's appropriate to remind us in this context here, Cassio, is that the greatest trade agreement that Brazil can do is not with the United States or with even China. Perhaps that the best one would be from Brazil with itself, reducing the cost of doing business in our country, cutting red tape, eliminating unnecessary bureaucracy, streamlining, the process for opening a business, etc. Things that have been long reclaimed by the private sector, and which this administration is committed to address. I'm very hopeful that with the new leadership in Congress and the commitment they have reaffirmed for the process of economic reform, that we will be able to address that. And that more than anything else, that more than competition with third countries is key to increase Brazilian exports around the world and specifically to the United States.
Interesting. And about trade agreements, we have one question here. Do you believe in the USMCA as the new acronym for the NAFTA, no? Free trade agreement, or would be more pragmatic, have direct negotiation between the two countries? What as a diplomat, what do you prefer? Negotiate with all the countries together here, the USMCA, or you think it's more pragmatic, talk with the US and make a trade agreement, free trade agreement with the US? That's one question we have here.
Very good question. Look, you know, this is a political decision that will have to be taken at the appropriate time when we decide on the way to proceed. I'd say that Brazil today would be ready to address, to begin talks in any format. Look, you know, the U.S. is the largest market. Of course, it would be, you know, tremendous interest in dealing directly with the United States. We have said in the past, you know, we could go together with our Mercosur partners, for instance, and negotiate with the United States, but that's more up to them than to us. We are ready to go alone if it's necessary and to go with them if they are interested. Some are, some are not. Perhaps we could devise, you know, a different architecture of that. But when you think about the USMCA, Brazil has already lots of preferential agreements with Mexico under the framework of ALADI, the Latin American Trade Integration Association. Those need, you know, periodical updates and so on. And we are, Mercosur is already negotiating, and it's one of the negotiations which is more advanced. We're already negotiating with Canada. So, you know, it should not be too hard to try to approach those. Of course, you know, Brazil and the US negotiations would be, let's say, the main way to go. But I think we should be open to you know, bringing more partners in on each side if that proves to be more interesting. Of course, the more people, you know, the larger the market, the larger the opportunities. Also, you know, more complexities will be involved in the negotiations in terms of, you know, addressing specific concerns that each country has.
Okay. We have some questions about about the importance of small business in the trade, in the export and import market. And we know that also all the consulates, they have the trade promotion department there to support any company, any Brazilian company or any US company that want to be doing business between the two countries. How do you see the importance of the small Brazilian business in terms of exports to the US? Do you see, like, is there an important market share, or the Brazilian small business should do more to reach the US market?
Excellent question. Of course, we can always do more. Small businesses, the first thing about small businesses we should approach, perhaps, it's not exactly their export profile, but how crucial they are for generating jobs. Small and medium-sized companies are the greatest job creators in Brazil and the United States, in different areas of the economy, especially services and so on. That's one thing. Second thing is, you know, as you said, Cassio, very well, our consulates, most of them here in the United States, have a very, very active trade promotion, trade and investment promotion sections. And our consulate in Miami is no different. You know, so we are open here to assist in trying to find opportunities, niche opportunities, etc., to try to guide small businesses to kind of reach the American market and gather the scale that they need to grow. You know, look, many big companies start small, and when they are successful, they become, you know, some of the giants that we know today. And you know, I'm glad to report that Brazil is home to 14 unicorns, 14 companies which started as, you know, startups and now have gone over $1 billion. And so I think those success stories should always inspire us to try to, you know, to help the entrepreneurial small businesses and find new opportunities and grow, including in the American market.
yeah, small business, like as you said, generate a lot of jobs. So it's important we have some kind of not protection, but because I don't like the term protection, but we'd like to have some programs that can help small business survive in this environment. Talking about a little bit environment protection, you already explained in your remarks that you've been talking with the U.S. government about the way Brazil thinks, and but looks like there is a duality between protection and versus sustainable growth. So how do you view this duality? Like, in order to preserve rainforest, but on the other side, you have also to provide better living conditions for the Brazilians that are residing there. So how can we convince these like organizations that intend to protect the rainforest against all, but also we have to protect those people that are living there? So how, Ambassador Nestor, you think you can convince that maybe the two things can be done together?
Well, excellent question. Enables us to allows us to discuss a little bit the challenges we have in this very crucial area. The answer for that, Cassio, it's very clear. We don't have a choice in doing either the economic development side or doing the environment side. We have to do both things together. And this is something that was addressed for the first time at the international level at the Rio conference back in 1992. João Mendes and I are very proud because that's part of the legacy of our generation of diplomats in Itamaraty. When he got out of the diplomatic academy in the late 80s, in my case, early 90s, others, people wanted to work with the environment. And we were part of crafting this concept of sustainable development with three pillars: the social, the economic, and the environmental. And they should reinforce each other and go together. We should never approach this as an either-or situation. They need to go together. And how can they go together? Some of the instruments to do that are already in place. For instance, Brazil has one of the most strict forestry codes anywhere in the world. In the case of the Amazon region, our forestry code requires that 80% of the natural vegetation be fully preserved in any property in the Amazon. So you can only work on 20%. Of course, the big question there is enforcement, and we need to work together to bring incentives for those who preserve. That's something in which we have failed. And when I say we, I'm not talking only about Brazil, but about the international community who had committed, goes back to the 10, 15 years ago since the Kyoto agreements, committed to remunerating, ecosystem services and so on. And this has not yet come to fruition. So this is an area where Brazil and the US can cooperate bilaterally. And that's exactly one of the areas which we are discussing, how to provide incentives for those who want to preserve. That's one thing. Second thing, how can we scale up successful projects that enable us to do what we want to do, create opportunity for those Brazilians who live there to improve their lives and at the same time protect the environment. That's the whole realm of bioeconomy. And what do I mean by that? You have, many areas: ecotourism, the cosmetics, pharmaceutical industry. You have aquaculture for the tremendous, delicious Amazon fish. Those are all initiatives which are already on the ground. They need to be scaled up to bring those opportunities to a larger number of people. There are many sustainable initiatives in that area. We need to do more, perhaps, in terms of using technology, using drone technology, radar technology to monitor what goes on there. And I'm happy to report that just 10 days ago, Brazil launched the first satellite, which was totally designed and assembled in Brazil. It's called the Amazon 1, and it has that name for a reason. And the reason is that it has, it will enable us, it's already doing that, to monitor what goes on in the region in a more efficient way, with more precise images coming up for our authorities, including the enforcement authorities, to fight illegal activities. A good part of what we talk when we talk about deforestation, or a good part, the vast majority of it is illegal activity. We need to fight illegal deforestation. We need to fight illegal mining. We are committed to doing so. We have produced great results of Operations Green Brazil 1 and 2. The second one will just wrap up next month. We need to continue that sort of high-level commitment to fighting these illegal activities and bring a zero tolerance policy, which is what has been affirmed by the Minister of the Environment and others. And we have a great partnerships in that too with state governors. Let me just give you one example. The state of Mato Grosso recently reported a reduction in deforestation in the state of Mato Grosso of about a third compared with a year ago. So the data for August through February, 34% of reduction in deforestation. How was that achieved? With a great commitment to fighting illegal activities. So this is the sort of partnership that we want, and now we have international partners also trying to give a prize to the state of Mato Grosso for being successful in those initiatives. Well, perhaps that's something that can inspire us and be replicated around the country, around the Amazon region, with good results for the environment and for human development.
Very important explanations, Ambassador Nestor. And in this subject, how do you see or how do you view the importance of transparency? Like the way we communicate. Maybe Brazil should improve our communication about what you are doing, about our rules, the way we've been protecting the Amazon area, because as you said, we've been doing a lot of things, but looks like foreigners, they don't see in this way. Do you think that we can improve the way we share our actions?
Absolutely, absolutely. The first thing, Cassio, is to recognize that we do have an image problem, a perception problem here in the US, or perhaps more so in Europe, about what we are doing in the environment. We are not being as efficient in communicating what we're doing as perhaps we should, and that's the first thing. But the second thing is to admit that there are real challenges on the ground. This is not just an image problem. So we need to address the underlying causes, and I think that the image will also improve. We have to do a better job. For instance, when people try to politicize this discussion, it's usually the worst way to try to understand what's going on. For instance, when we talk about deforestation, people try to pinpoint this at the Bolsonaro administration. But the deforestation trend in Brazil began 8 years ago. 8 years ago. And it's been going on. We have the preliminary data for the past 6 months show a dent in the upward curve, in the growing curve in deforestation. So there are some good news there, which are obviously a result of what the federal government is doing with the operations I just mentioned of fighting illegal deforestation and so on. But perhaps we could be, and we should be more assertive in reminding people of the environmental credentials of Brazil. Things like the fact that 2/3 of the Brazilian territory, 2/3 have its original vegetation cover. No other country in the world, especially no other big country in the world, has anything comparable to that. The United States has about 20% of its original vegetation. European countries, many of them, who are very concerned about the environment, have exactly 0 of the original forestry cover. It's all gone. So Brazil has preserved 2/3 of its territory covered with the original vegetation. 82% of the Amazon forest, the original forest, is preserved. 82%. So when you see the headlines, people think that there are 3 trees left there, and they lose sight that the Amazon, when we talk about the Amazon, we're talking about an area which is 7 times the size of the state of Texas. Okay, that's how big the Amazon is. 82% of which is intact. The original forest is there. Brazil is home in the Amazon and in other biomes around the country, is home to the largest biodiversity of any country in our planet. Brazil has the cleanest energy mix of any country. People say of the G20, group. No. It's of any country. 46% of all the energy used in Brazil, 46% comes from renewable sources. If we take only electricity, it's 85% that comes from hydro or biomass, ethanol. Brazil began its energy transition even before it was fashionable and people were, going crazy about the climate change and so on. Brazil began this over 50 years ago with the ethanol program, which is still going on today. Over 80% of Brazilian cars can operate either on gas or on ethanol. Ethanol has a carbon footprint which is several times less than whatever you do with gasoline. And Brazil adds 25% of its gasoline is mixed with ethanol, 27%, I'm sorry. Here in the US, it's 10% and it's kind of optional. Other countries, great countries, Japan, only 3%. So we see tremendous room to improve that in not thinking only about increasing our exports of ethanol, but in transforming ethanol into a world commodity, in getting our technology, our great technology from Embrapa and from great private sector companies in Brazil to countries like India, to countries like countries in Africa, which have the adequate soil and climate conditions, and have sugarcane production with this high technology that we use in Brazil, which enables us to get ethanol, second generation ethanol, third generation ethanol, using the same piece of plant, the same soil, the same carbon footprint, and increasing the production almost threefold. So these are some of the things that perhaps we should do a better job in promoting around the world. Brazil is a green powerhouse and will remain that way. And this administration is committed to doing just that.
Interesting. Yeah, it's a very you have a lot of numbers in your head, so so that's interesting. So congratulations, Ambassador Nestor. We are run out of our time. I will pick the two last questions. As I told, if you send a question that is not answered, we will send to the embassy in Washington, and they will take care of that. So, Ambassador, what are the main issues in the agenda between Brazil and the US? Is there any issue that is important or concerning for Brazil, in your opinion? Any issue you have that's more important? What do you think that's more important today in our agenda between US and Brazil?
Look, the top priority from the American point of view, for the Biden administration, is undoubtedly the whole question of the environment. They have, mentioned that repeatedly, and we are paying attention and we are ready to address those, and we are already addressing that. So that's, let's say, an outstanding issue, an issue of paramount importance. But if you consider all the many issues I mentioned here, which are part of our bilateral agenda, and how big Brazil and the US are and how complex our relations are, it's very hard to pinpoint to one single issue and say that these two great democracies, these two great economies, now will concentrate and will only talk about this narrow set of issues. That actually doesn't work. We have given priority to the environmental discussion, but we are not leaving aside our interest in deepening our trade relationship, in continue to attract investment and technology from the United States, in increasing our cooperation in science, in opening a whole new field in space exploration, and continue to do a lot in terms of education opportunities for Brazilians and sharing educational experiences and so on. The whole cooperation on health is paramount during the pandemic. It's been going on, it will continue. And I'd say that, we have this whole set of institutional framework that works on a day-to-day basis for our relations. I'm talking about the CEO forum, which brings the private sector into the fold, the commercial dialogue, the agreement on trade and economic cooperation, under which we just negotiated the 3 protocols, which I mentioned, and so many other institutional arrangements. And this is all going on. So it would be unfair to say, now we're going to do this and forget about the rest. I think, my personal preference is to try to do the best in all these areas, with, of course, a sense of priority. From the Brazilian point of view, continuing to expand, trade and investment is a top priority. Continue to cooperate, promoting our shared values, democracy, rule of law, respect for human rights, economic freedom remains also a top priority. There's much we can continue to do as we've been doing, including in our region and international fora.
Thank you, Ambassador. This question here, I don't know if a very specific question to Florida, Miami, but we have a question about the Compra Fora program. That's a program that was signed between, I think, Miami in Brazil. I don't know if it's a question for Ambassador João Mendes, but can you provide an update on the Compra Fora program here in Miami? I don't know if I heard about this program, so that's why I would like to share this question.
I've had not heard of it. I'm sorry. I mean, if Ambassador João Mendes wants to address it, feel free to do so.
Thank you, Nestor. Just to say, it's a pioneer program of e-commerce between Correios do Brasil and here in Miami, also USPS. It's for products under $3,000, and in 3 days, you have your product with you. And it's important also to say that it helps a lot to avoid tax evasion. So it's a very successful program. We here work on this with our trade promotion sector. We can provide more information for those who are interested in that. And we are in straight cooperation with several agencies here in Miami, especially Beacon Council and others. We can, after that, provide more information for those who are interested too. And sorry to disturb your extraordinary speech, Minister.
Thank you very much, João, for that. Yeah, look, I didn't connect the name to the program. I'm familiar with the program, and it plays a vital role in small packages and so on. It's a good and dynamic part of our bilateral trade increasingly, and there's a value cap for that to streamline, customs procedures and so on. And I'm glad to see it's working and the role played by the consulate in supporting the program. Thank you.
So we have more than 10 questions, 12 questions left behind here. So we'll send that questions to our embassy in Washington to be answered. So Ambassador Nestor Forster, congratulations for your presentation, for your remarks. You have a very clear understanding about your role, about the role of the Brazilian diplomacy here in the US. I think we are in very good hands here. Congratulations for that. I'd like to give you the floor for your final remarks, please. And Ambassador, sorry, after that, I'd like to make the line. Ambassador João Mendes, after our ambassador, you can talk, and Alexandre Piquet for the closing remarks. Please, Ambassador.
Thank you very much, Cássio. Just a word of thank you. Thank you very much for your kind comments. And this is a great opportunity. I appreciate it tremendously, all the questions and all the interest and the vibrant participation. And let me just tell you to wrap up that we are open here to help in whatever capacity we can. Of course, you have the great presence of our Consulate General there in Miami with the trade promotion sector. But whatever questions you feel you need to be addressed to the embassy, we're here to try to help with those. We have our doors are open with pandemic, without. We continue to be here to listen to suggestions and to try to help and answer questions to the best of our ability. So thank you very much, Cássio, Alexandre Piquet, and Ambassador João Mendes for organizing this conversation. I appreciate it immensely. Let's do it again in person in Miami. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nestor. And my friends, as I said in my final remarks, you can see that I was not exaggerating when I say Nestor is a true example of the very best our diplomacy has to offer. Thank you very much, Nestor. And we are waiting for your visit as soon as possible here in Miami. Pleasure to talk to you.
Yes, amazing presentation, Ambassador Nestor Forster. This is a true honor to have you here speaking about such important issues. I'd like to thank you again. Also, Ambassador João Mendes, our good friend and the responsible for the Brazilian General Consulate in Miami, Mr. Cássio Segura. Thank you for great moderation and conducting this event. And also thanks for all of those who participated, especially those who replied to our poll. We had it going on the whole event for answers regarding indoor and outdoor events inclinations. And now we have the numbers to better program our year for the community here in South Florida. Thank you very much. This was a great event, wonderful explanations, wonderful presentation. And thanks again for your online participation, and hopefully, like Ambassador João Mendes just said, in-person participation in the second semester, hopefully, Ambassador Nestor Forster. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
You too.